Okay, would you do roll call, please?
You start the meeting.
You gotta bring the meeting to order first.
Oh, I bring the meeting to order first.
There you go. Picky, picky,
Now
picky.
roll.
Well, yeah, Jared needs to revise his cheat sheet here.
Okay.
So the meeting is in order. Would you please?
Sure. You bet. Meredith Boa. Here. Eric Dowd.
Here.
Mark Mahoney.
Here.
Heather McDonald. Here. John Williams.
Here.
And Kim McGee.
Present.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting? And are there any corrections or additions? Any minutes? No? Or a motion to approve the minutes as written?
I'll make that motion.
Wait a second.
And Mark makes the second. The minutes have been approved. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion has carried. The consent calendar. Any changes to the consent calendar? Okay, motion. All in favor? By the note, my notes.
I don't know what.
Are there any items from citizens not present on the agenda? Is somebody online?
That's Lindsay.
She's our certified local government
Okay,
liaison.
okay, action items, moving right into it.
Okay, so Lindsay is on the Zoom call. She's our certified local government liaison. And this is our check-in. It's a triannual check-in.
Perennial.
Perennial.
And so she's just here to answer any questions, to talk about where we are with our grant and just so forth. So I'll let her go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good, sorry. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Lindsay Flewelling, as Kay was saying. I'm the CLG coordinator at History Colorado. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, I really tried. But I was sitting on Floyd Hill for like 4 hours, so
Yes.
not the best day, but glad I made it home in time for the meeting. So the CLG program is a local government partnership program with the State Historic Preservation Office, which is at History Colorado. And we also call it the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So all of those are essentially the same thing. And then we have our federal partners with the National Park Service. So essentially your local government preservation program is certified as meeting state and federal parameters for preservation programs. We currently have 67 CLGs in Colorado, and they're about 2,100 nationwide. So our program is pretty robust for a state of our population size. The big benefits of the CLG program, excuse me, are CLG grants, which you guys have one right now. So you're familiar with that, but those are meant to help to fund projects that directly benefit your local government preservation program. So things like preservation plans, surveys, design guidelines like you guys are doing, education and outreach projects, and other things that directly benefit the local government's preservation program. And those are currently due every January. but we may see some shifts with the federal funding situation that's currently going on. But if it stands as things normally do moving forward, we put out the applications every October, and then they're due in mid-January every year. Another CLG benefit is access to National Park Service grants that are for preservation projects. They have some grants that cover physical construction, and then they also do some like survey and National Register designation grants. And their current grant that's open with them, which doesn't apply to you guys, but it's something to keep in mind for the future, is that they have an emergency grant, which is covering reconstruction or rehabilitation work for properties that have been destroyed in natural disasters. So that it has to be in a county that was a federal emergency or a federal disaster area from the past 2 years. But they do have those types of grants periodically if there ever is a problem that a property needs to be addressed. So those grants are specifically eligible for CLGs to apply to. And it does sound like the fiscal year 25 National Park Service grants are going to be announced at some point in the late summer or early fall. So hopefully they'll still be offering some of those grants for that FY25 funding, which is really exciting. Another big CLG benefit is that your locally designated properties and any contributing properties in local historic districts are eligible for our state residential and commercial tax credits. So these, since you're in a rural area, are for up to 35% of rehabilitation expenditures. So essentially property owners are getting, a third of their expenditures back in tax credits. For the residential program, it's really one of the only incentives you can get as a residential property owner for historic preservation. And it's just a really great program, and it's going to improve in the next couple of years. So currently, if you don't have that high of a state income tax liability, then your tax credits are spread out over a 10-year period. But starting in 2027, it'll become fully refundable. So you can do up to $100,000 worth of work, and then the state will just write you a check at tax time, refunding you that money. So refunding you 35% of that money. So it'll be just a really great program and hopefully encourage a lot of residential designation throughout the state. And then for the commercial tax credits, those are for 35% on the first $2 million spent on a commercial project, and then 30% on the rest of the money spent on a commercial project. So just really great tax credit programs that are run through our office. We've got a tax credit specialist, and she's always happy to talk through different projects that might come up in your local area. Another benefit, which essentially any property that's locally landmarked or on the state or national register has access to state historical fund grants if they have a public benefit to their property or to the project. And I'm going to talk about those a little bit more in depth in a minute. Kay mentioned that you might be interested in knowing more about those, but we just are really lucky in Colorado to have these robust incentives available for preservation. Some other CLG benefits are access to Compass, which is our statewide cultural resource database. So you can see all the information that's been collected on different properties, over time. Sometimes it might be things like CDOT projects where the local government doesn't necessarily even know that these surveys and inventories have been done. So we've got all of that information on our database. Training, I do it's currently every other month webinar series. And then I'll also be doing a CLG forum for local governments in your area, which will be virtual. Yours will be either in October or December. I don't have the schedule on me, but there's quite a few in your area. So Glenwood Springs, Newcastle, Aspen, and a few others in your local area. And I think it's just a great opportunity to talk to other people about their local preservation programs and share some common challenges and exciting things that are going on in these different areas. So those are some of my favorite things to do, is have the forums and have everybody kind of meet each other and share what's going on in their local areas. So keep an eye out for an invitation for that later this fall. For CLG responsibilities, the first one is to enforce your own local preservation ordinance. So part of my job is to make sure that everybody is following their own rules that they've set for themselves. And knowing your own ordinance is just a really important part of being in the, your historic preservation program. Establish and maintain a commission, which you guys don't have any problems with. Send meeting minutes over to me, which your staff is also really great about doing. Provide for adequate public participation, so making sure you're following all open meetings laws. And then if you're doing a project that like a preservation plan or survey or your design guidelines project, making sure that the public has ample opportunity to participate appropriately in that type of project. Maintaining a system of survey and inventory, which you're also great at. One person from the commission needs to attend a SHPO approved training each year. So that could be something like the Saving Places Conference or National Alliance of Preservation Commissions conference or trainings, or my webinar series, things like that. It's pretty broad. Submit an annual report. Those are due every November 1st. And then every 4 years, there's an evaluation. So that's why I'm here tonight. The evaluation entails me attending a Historic Preservation Commission meeting. And then I will have a meeting with your staff just to talk about sort of the direction they see for the preservation program. And then I read through all of the last 4 years of annual reports and meeting minutes, which I've already read, but like read over the notes from those. And just make sure that you're following all of the parameters for the CLG program. So that's the CLG program in a nutshell. Kay asked if I could talk briefly about the State Historical Fund and then potentially about the sort of difference between your courtesy reviews versus mandatory reviews as you start to get more interest in local landmarking. But I guess I'll pause and see if you had any questions about the CLG program.
Hi, Lindsay. When is your Pueblo event? It's August, right? Did it already happen? It was in June.
It did, yeah. The Pueblo on the road.
Don't you have something coming up in August or no?
So in August, the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions is doing a virtual summer school. They do it every other year, and I went to the one 2 years ago, and it is very, very good. So I definitely recommend attending if you're able. They're all, I mean, if you attend the live sessions, I think you can ask questions live, but they do record all of them. So, you can like register and then watch it over the next like few weeks if needed.
Thank you.
Any other comment? Question? No?
Well, I can talk a little bit about the State Historical Fund if you're interested. So that's sort of our office's other half. And they give out about $11 million in grants each year. So it's a pretty big operation. They do a really great job. They have competitive grants with 2 deadlines each year. Those are due every October 1st and April 1st. They just announced their April grant awards like 2 weeks ago. And there are, I mean, I'm always excited. There's a good number of CLGs that get grants every grant round. So for those, they cover the same sorts of things as CLG grants. So they could do, preservation plans, surveys, ordinance updates, education and outreach projects and things directly for your local government preservation program. But then they also fund physical construction work on historic properties and also planning documents for that construction. So construction documents, any sort of, architectural drawings, historic structure assessments and things like that. And then as well as the physical construction work. So they fund grants for up to $250,000. They do require a match, but work can also be like phased out over multiple grant rounds so that you're able to get those construction projects completed, since things are very expensive to be able to get completed. But another great thing with the State Historical Fund grants is that they can potentially be layered with the state tax credits. So you could be getting tax credits on the work as well as grant funding for some of the work along with that. So those are due every April 1st and October 1st. And then they also have a non-competitive grant pool that renews every July 1st, the beginning of the state fiscal year. And those are for most of their non-competitive grants are for up to $15,000, and they're for things like historic structure assessments, planning grants, which is a pretty broad category that can include things like National Register, State Register nominations, but it can also include construction documents and other assessments and things like that. And then survey plans are also another category. And then they just have a micro grant, which is for $5,000 and is kind of like a catch-all category. So if you wanted to run like a, historic window repair workshop for a day, or do some kind of outreach project or something like that, or just have an extremely small construction project, the micro grants are available as well. But yeah, just a really, really great program that we have available in Colorado. Yeah, and then I guess I was going to briefly talk about design review. Design review is required for all certified local governments in Colorado. And so, you guys do that through courtesy reviews of your downtown area, and, with the hope to expand that to the Old Town residential area. And if you're looking at your ordinance, it's really clearly laid out into two separate sections. So you have your landmark alteration certificate section, but then you have your non-landmark building section. And I think just knowing your own ordinance is really key here. So, you're used to following all of the ordinance requirements around the non-landmark buildings for the courtesy reviews. But once you start to review landmark properties, that will require an actual landmark alteration certificate and be a mandatory process. So I think that, it's a little bit less of a negotiation with the property owner, but you would still want to go in with, you need to follow the Secretary of the Interior standards and your own design guidelines, but still have an attitude of like positive working with the property owner and helping them to follow what's required for their property and to help their property maintain its historic character. But I think looking at your ordinance does a great job of laying out the two separate types of design review. And I'm always here to help answer any questions that come up about, what might be the differences in the two processes, but you're used to working with your own design guidelines. Those meet the Secretary of the Interior standards already. And then I always think of the SOI standards as sort of a fallback. They're so broad that if there's not something specifically mentioned in your design guidelines, you can go to the SOI standards and use those and try to apply them to anything that might not have been previously contemplated that comes up as you're doing design review. But yeah, I think that you're pretty lucky in having these extremely clear sections in your ordinance, because not everybody has that clear delineation with the mandatory design review and the courtesy reviews. So I think that it's great that this is clearly laid out. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was our History Colorado's Colorado Heritage for All program, our initiative that we have to put 150 sites on the state or national register associated with underrepresented communities. Our office did an audit of the state and national register listings for Colorado in 2020 and found that only 4% of all sites listed on the state or national register were associated with Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ people, and other underrepresented communities and women. So it was, just 4%. And so in anticipation of the America 250, Colorado 150 next year in 2026, we're working toward putting 150 sites on the national state registers to try to recognize all of the contributions of these underrepresented communities to the history of our state. And we actually just had the Rebecca Lodge in Carbondale placed on the state register. And I think, I don't know, it's really cool to me because I met with Kay last fall and we were talking about properties that might fit in with the Heritage for All program. And then like the following week, we were meeting with, members of the Rebeccas. And then now it's already on the state register less than a year later. So I feel like that's a huge success story and opens the door for them to be able to get state historical fund grants and other incentives to be able to maintain the building there. So that was just a really great one, and have that wonderful role of women in Carbondale recognized on the state register is really great. So if any other properties come to mind, we have 3 Heritage for All fellows currently who are writing nominations, which isn't something our office normally has the capacity to do. So just a really great opportunity while we have people on our staff to be able to write the nominations and get properties on the state or national register. But we're always happy to take suggestions. We have another, I guess, year and a half of the program. So really ramping up and getting properties listed. But yeah, those are all the things I wanted to mention. And of course, I'm here as a resource for you all if you ever have any questions, and I'm happy to answer them now or anytime.
Questions, comments? Well, thank you, Wendy. It's a whole lot of different areas. We are in the thick of our own consulting for Old Town Residential, and look forward to having that evolve. And really want to thank you for being a backup in terms of if questions, issues, concerns come up. Having you available is really terrific. So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. And I'm reading all the deliverables for that grant project as well. So if anything ever comes up, I'm pretty familiar with the different materials.
Well, we have a really big to-do list, but we really have a lot to do to get through our current workload. But there is a number of projects that we want to pursue, and it just takes time. So anyway, thank you very much.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
items. Okay. Old Town Design Guidelines Update. Susanna?
Hi, everyone. Okay. Hi, everyone. It was great having Lindsay on before me so I could have a chance to get my brain into out of driving mode. And I think I'll start with kind of touch on what Lindsay mentioned about the historic building section of our guidelines. Because we have a pretty good chapter, I think, in our current guidelines on the treatment of historic buildings. There's a little bit more that we need to do there in terms of that was written really recognizing the historic core buildings and the commercial buildings. And so part of what you'll see on this chapter 1 and language that I just kind of got started on is making sure that those chapters that already exist can apply both to the historic core, to the OTR, and to any other buildings that come up as landmarks. in the future. So hopefully that won't be too much additional guidelines, but I think that that's kind of a section separate from what we're focusing on now, which is how to guide new construction in the OTR zone. Because really, I think there are only 4, if I'm remembering correctly, actual historic buildings or recognized historic buildings in the OTR zone right now that have been surveyed. I think that's right. It's just a small handful of buildings.
Do you mean
Yeah.
national? Nationally recognized?
No,
or-
locally recognized.
Or structures of merit, right?
Yeah, on the structures of merit list, that's right.
Okay,
So most of what you're gonna see in this couple pages that that you got this evening are for how to handle new buildings in this zone district. And what we'll do in the actual how to treat historic buildings in the district will be kind of a separate discussion. So that's kind of what we're starting with, because this is the harder part. Finding the right balance between guiding new construction and not telling people exactly what to build. So I know you just got this in front of you. So I think we should just walk through these kind of bullet points that I've developed from our walkthrough, the notes on our walkthrough, and from the outline that I presented last with the report that was submitted, I think in May, was that right? So as we go through this, I just want to make sure we all are talking about new construction. The main sections that I kind of have developed or are in the process of developing is kind of the first chapter would be site planning issues. We talked about following more of a historic pattern on the street, bringing buildings up to the setback line or close to the setback line to encourage people to build a home that addresses the street in some way, as opposed to hiding behind a fence or behind a very large yard, or kind of keeps the fabric of the street intact. And as we go through these things, you know, make up your mind whether this is something you think is important to the neighborhood or not. That's part of this process, because we want to kind of figure out what are the things that make the OTR zone work or not work the way it is now. And we're talking about stuff that exists and stuff that could exist in the future. So all these pieces that I'm suggesting are really just a starting point for making decisions on whether we want that to be part of the guidelines or not. Does that make sense? Okay. Maintaining a variety of scale buildings, a mix of large and small. That's kind of what I saw walking around the district. I don't know if there are any options for combining lots or subdividing lots in the land use code, but that would be an area that we might want to look at to encourage either small, because we've got a significant large historic house, we've got significant very small historic houses. Do we want to maintain that mixture of scale in that district? Building orientation is a pretty common guideline about having the primary facade face the primary street, limit parking and garages in the front of the building. Again, setbacks, do we want to maintain the minimum setback? Do we want to give a variety of setbacks in that in the district? This, what I have now, is kind of maintaining the minimum setback at the street front.
Suzanne,
Yes.
are you looking for feedback from us right now? as
Yeah,
we-
if you want to give feedback right now,
as we
that's
go through
fine.
it? I'm
Yeah,
just-
because I know I figured since you'd only had this for 10 minutes, you might want to have a chance to think about it.
I didn't know if you wanted real-time feedback, but
Yeah, I'm happy to do either way. If you have things you want to say, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think some feedback would be good, but we probably want to limit that because this is a fairly long document.
okay.
But I'm fine for feedback. That's why we're here.
And I'm hoping by next month, you guys will have had a chance to sit with this enough and really, think about it and have more specifics, because right now these are very broad. And there's a fine line between too broad and too precise. So we want to kind of find that area. So Mark, if you wanted to make some comments on this here and now, that would be fine.
I'll wait for that.
Okay. Think about alleys and outbuildings. I don't know if the trash collection takes place in the alleys or how functional the alleys are currently. But that's another area that we might want to look at, how we want to talk about outbuildings. And there may be historic outbuildings that are remaining where the main house has been demolished or rebuilt. So that's an area that we need a little bit more.
I think that needs to be included. The outbuildings are an important part of the fabric.
And you can see I have a couple bullet points about alley buildings. I'm suggesting having kind of a guidelines about the schematic layout of buildings. In, keeping, again, in an attempt to sort of have a traditional approach to how you design the building in terms of addressing the street, having the more quasi-public activities on the street and keeping the more private in the back. And that's kind of a typical guideline to reinforce a residential district as opposed to having houses completely turn their back on the street. That's what makes it more pedestrian friendly, etc.
I think it'd be nice to kind of define it, consider the character of the street, define what character really means. That's one of those broad terms.
Yes. And I didn't really get a sense when we did our walkthrough from some of the comments that you guys gave back to me, what you thought this, not necessarily the historic character of the OTR zone is, but what are the elements of zone you felt were character defining and wanted to encourage. So I don't really have a good sense of that. I'm hoping through this process of me giving you some suggestions that you can tell me yes or no, and we can kind of get at that, what that is. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Another bunch of more traditional guidelines, driveways, parking, and garage locations. Encouraging people not to have garage doors facing the primary street or a lot of driveway or a lot of parking area in the front yard. I think when we did our walkthrough, I got the sense that you guys really liked the wide variety of fences and kind of yard stuff that was going on. There's a lot of personality in the front yards of a lot of the houses, and I think you guys liked that. That was my impression. So I'm trying to keep the landscaping and fences to kind of not cut back on that. Then we'd skip to another chapter, which would be kind of building form and massing. And this is another area where that idea of character, we really need to work on pinning down better. And this is another area where we get into trouble with being too broad, too much vague language about, keep the character, break down the massing, do, the kind of buzzwords that don't really mean anything, and how do we capture the things that we want to do without limiting creativity or individualness or some of the quirkiness that makes the current neighborhood appealing. That's going to be the hard part of the job. And I did kind of take from, just so you know how I kind of did this, use the chapter 3 that we currently have in terms of new construction in the HCC zone and try to kind of mimic those bullets and those guideline headings as I kind of created this document. So if you want to go back and look at the HCC zone and think about how that's written and how that might not necessarily particularly apply to OTR, but the general sections of guidelines that exist there. Does that make sense?
Okay, shut up. Sorry about that.
Do you want new buildings to recognize smaller buildings that are next to them? That's kind of a typical mode as well. If you have a 1-story house and you're getting a much larger house next door, do you want some real acknowledgement of that 1-story adjacency? That's something that we might look more specifically at. I kind of did a lot of repetition in here of making sure that designs are consistent in terms of if you have a building that has horizontal proportions, that all the other decisions kind of should either reinforce that or make or accentuate it or de-accentuate it. To kind of find a way to suggest good architectural design without telling people how to design and what to design. So you'll kind of see some repetition as we go through this particular chapter about that. I don't know if we have the opportunity to break down larger buildings. Whether we have the opportunity to say, if you have 6 lots, can you do 2 buildings instead of 1 giant one? I don't know if that's something that can happen.
Could you say that again, starting with, you don't know if we have the opportunity to break down small?
So let's say
big
somebody
large
came along and bought, 5 adjacent or 6 adjacent lots and tore everything down on there. Could they build 1 giant building on those lots?
Yeah, we haven't thought about that one.
I mean, I think it's
Planning?
theoretically possible. Yeah, I don't think there's anything in our code that would.
Lot size minimum, but.
No
Yeah,
maximum.
but not a maximum.
So that's something that we might want to consider.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. One, this is kind of jumping out of the
Sure.
format here, but have you talked about, or have you thought about what we could do a stick and carrot concepts where, some of these, for instance, breaking up the massing would be a requirement if you were to do something,
Yeah.
given something, for example.
Yeah. The one that we've talked about a lot is the CDU situation, or the kind of rental unit situation. And I think that's a very powerful one, because right now that's, what everyone wants. And it would give the opportunity to say, yeah, you can build this house, but some of your floor area has to be in a separate building. You can't just, max out the lot. And if you get that separate building, then that kind of puts you into the review process.
Right.
And maybe
So-
there's a way to give more, give variances or sort of find a way to craft that. So making this separate building puts you into design review, but also gives you ways of, maybe it's on the alley, maybe it's a setback relief, maybe it's additional floor area, although you guys don't do specifically floor area, do you?
No, we use impervious surface.
Yeah, and maybe that's an area where you could have relief from a
Yeah.
code requirement.
Are we thinking about modifying UDC language to,
Well, I mean, it may, if you really want to create powerful incentives for going through this process, you need to
yeah,
have those exceptions from
yeah,
the code.
yeah.
And that's really the way it works, because otherwise, the things that Lindsay talked about in terms of state historic fund grants and other things like that really only apply to his designated historic buildings.
Yeah.
So you have to find other ways of encouraging, besides money, encouraging people to do good design. And one of those is
It's
giving
part
them
of your scope of work, looking at some of that language.
that is something that we touched on a little bit when we kind of designed the project to begin with.
Uh-huh.
And I'm, happy to look and make recommendations.
We'd be
on those
happy for you to
things.
look at that.
And yeah, I think because really the problem with this document is it doesn't, it'll be a nice document when it's done, but it doesn't have any power to do anything. And finding ways of encouraging people to participate in, a design review or a guidelines process is to find ways of giving them relief from the things that are in their way for doing what they want.
Right. Right.
I think the terminology of caretaker, I think it was only from Picking County's land use code.
Okay,
So I
I
think
wasn't sure what you called them.
we call it accessory dwelling
Oh,
units
okay.
here.
Where is that?
425.
5.
Caretaker is more to me of like somebody living on like a property manager, ranch manager kind of thing. When this accessory dwelling unit kind of goes for just workforce and.
Yeah. And, that again is a big issue, and having more, multifamily ability on a lot is, I think, the direction that people are going in, towns are going in. So that's something I think we need to look at. Particularly also, historically, you had a house and an outbuilding, and that, that's very much part of the historic pattern of the town. So if we can kind of encourage that house and outbuilding kind of pattern, I think that makes a more interesting downtown. Massing and proportions, this is kind of just some language to start thinking about. Again, do you think that any of this is important, or do you want to not talk about it, or do you want to make it more specific? And then when we get to, I think that this accessory building conversation is a big one. How to craft it both in terms of guidelines, how to make the principal residence guidelines stronger relative to the caretaker dwelling or the accessory dwelling. We have to, if that's something we're really going to encourage people to do, I think the land use code and everything else has to back it up.
I also want to say that the P and Z is, well, they haven't yet, but they will start going through ADU code revisions soon. So, I mean, it might be hard. Both of you are going to be talking about it, you know, at the same time, which could be good, could be hard to, you know,
Yeah.
work together on that. But yeah, just want to throw that out there.
It could be good to have a commission member that's on both of those commissions.
Just do like a work session with them.
It would be interesting to know what they're thinking.
Well, we did talk about having a joint, some sort of joint meeting because they are going to be the commission that signs off on what we're proposing before it goes to the trustees. So that's a critical piece. And, you know, I think we should talk early and often if possible.
Although this is a little too early because we're not quite there, but
No, we're not
Maybe in a
there
month or
yet,
so.
but
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
moving down that path.
the ADU path.
Isn't the state also looking at revising ADU
Oh,
requirements?
I don't know.
Wendy, are you
Don't know
still
which
there?
bill number it is.
Yeah, so
Give us a little insight into what's happening at the state level with ADUs.
the state ADU requirements were changed last year, so like May of 2024, but it's specifically for like places that are in these transit zones. So I'm not sure that it would apply to your historic areas particularly, but yeah, just that like ADUs have to be allowed essentially, which we're fully supportive of. I mean, like Susanna's saying, they're traditionally, you know, in these residential neighborhoods, there would be an outbuilding. So it's not like it takes away from the character, you know, of an area particularly. I was going to say that, you know, if you're looking at different incentives or relief from code requirements, you'll have to work with your planning and zoning commission on those types of incentives as well. So I think that's great to hear that you're thinking about doing a work session with them. And then my other thought was that Crested Butte might be a good place to talk to because they also have the sort of quirky mixed age buildings. And they have, when they vote on their certificates of appropriateness, they have language that's like, if it's a new build, that the property will not be too similar or too dissimilar from what already exists, because they were having problems with like 5 houses in a row being newly built that looked just like each other. And that really takes away from the, you know, quirky mixed character of the area. So they might be a good contact, and Jesse Early there is very helpful.
Mel's the new community development director over there. And she worked on the historic preservation plan.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to see.
I have a copy of it.
Just one other thing on the ADU. So whatever we develop as our incentive in terms of ADUs can only apply to ADUs that are being reviewed by us. It can't just be a code wide, you know, opening the door. So the code has to stay, you know, I think we talked about the code in OTR right now, you can't have an ADU, is that right?
You can't have.
You can under
Oh.
certain circumstances.
Okay,
It's, yeah, only historic homes. Yeah.
yeah, so that you pretty much have to keep that and then say, but if you come and use our guidelines and do a review, then you can have this in this district. I mean, you have to, you can't just by opening the door to everyone, there's no incentive to come back and go through the design review. So you have to decide whether you're gonna say, okay, people who go through this process can have this thing. Everyone else, no one else, you know, the other people can't.
Interesting. Yeah, that really opens the door.
Yeah, because if you just say, okay, you can have a detached ADU in the OTR, you've given away your incentive to bring them into the review program.
Okay, well, we're looking for teeth, so any way we can find that is good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the game, you know, that's kind of what if you don't have a program that requires people to go through the review process, then you have to find ways, you know, of encouraging and opening a negotiation to get people to come in. So those are the trade-offs.
Yeah, I thought we were just limited to Old Town residential, but if we can have a review for, you know, the incentive program for that would be, I think probably we'd have to talk about it in terms, our
Mhm.
commission, do we really want to do that? But it might be a good thing to develop a, you know, broader review program.
Yeah. And I think as we go forward with the Old Town residential, it's possible that we could find that the guidelines that we're developing for that zone district may also easily apply to everyone else, depending on how specific they are to the zone district.
Right.
Which, you know, I think that when we walked around, it wasn't totally obvious. It wasn't obvious to the person walking around that where the zone districts changed. So there's a lot of overlap of character, just in general of the residential core of Carbondale.
Yeah.
So in the back of my mind, we'll just kind of keep things that could apply to any zone district as it comes into the program.
Keep up the good work.
The next sort of chapter is architectural elements, and this is where we get into, do we want everybody to have a gable roof? Do we want to, you know, I kind of landed in between, you know, gable roofs that are not low-pitched gable roofs and flat roofs. So flat roofs are okay, gable roofs are okay, but not that sort of strange in between 1 and 12 and 2 and 12 kind of roof shape, which is, you know, that thing that looks like you just put the trailer on top of another trailer. So think about that a little bit. The last bullet point I have under there is that low pitched roof shouldn't be the primary roof form. There should
There you
be,
go, John.
I think you just have to define low pitched.
yeah, right,
There's a lot of 4 and 12s.
yeah. Just have to figure out where we want to draw that line. Again, kind of doors and windows, design elements, materials, those are all very traditional guideline type things to talk about. And I kind of landed on, you know, are the proportions of those decisions appropriate for the larger design of the building? You know, is it a Victorian looking building with a stucco siding? You know, it's sort of, does the choice of materials, the choice of window pattern reflect the bigger architectural idea or not? But again, we're in a very gray area there, and who's making that determination can open the door for people to kind of say, well, you know, my opinion is different. You know, we have to write the guidelines that have enough specificity to back up what your decisions are going to be when you look at a case coming before you, and not leave the door too wide open for just opinion on everything. Personal opinion is fine on a few things, but personal opinion on everything negates the need for guidelines.
Yeah, and we have been there before, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this language is actually pretty nice, beginning to, not be prescriptive
Right.
and, but responsible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping, as you know, in the next few weeks, as you've had a chance to sit with this, to kind of find your appropriate level of more detail, less detail. What if there's language that you think is more appropriate, those kind of things, and kind of bring that back to me. Materials, I think we do have to talk about materials in the guidelines, because the hazard, if we don't, we'll get a lot of stucco and kind of materials that really diminish the visual interest of the street. So I think we have to talk about encouraging siding, wood siding, or a reasonable facsimile of wood siding, things with scale, things that contribute to the visual interest of the building, and also limiting the number of material choices on a building. So we don't get that, catalog of materials on every facade, I think is kind of makes everything just too busy.
Mhm.
So I try to kind of get to that with those bullet points. I'm not a fan of vinyl siding. I'm not a fan of stucco particularly. And I don't like a whole facade of fake stone. So I put that in there more specifically. And again, if you guys have, if you don't care about that, then we don't have to address it. So that's kind of the rough outline of the things that we would be talking about in the guidelines. I didn't get into, and I don't know if you can have a dumpster in your front yard, or, if you need to have a dumpster in your front yard. I didn't get into kind of more banners and kind of stuff that's not a permanent architectural decision. I can't really put my finger on it, but I'm sure something will show up at some point. But think about satellite dishes, which we can't really regulate, but something that we can encourage them to be located not on the front of the house or in the front yard. Things like that. I didn't really put that in a chapter yet, and we have to decide whether we think that's important or not. So kind of this is besides the first chapter 1 on the first page, there'll be a lot more of that. But this chapter 4 is sort of the outline of what ultimately will be the guidelines. And if there's something when you're walking around and you see something happening that you think is just not good, make a note of it, and we'll figure out how to craft something to avoid that going forward. But now I do want to go back to the idea of character and sort of pin you down a little bit more on what you think the character of the OTR is, apart from the rest of the residential neighborhoods. I'm going to make you come to grips with that question.
Old Town Residential is eclectic. It is a real mix of old and new. A lot of historic districts are, much easier to regulate because you're trying to, recreate mass scale materials, proportions to directly reflect what the old work.
Mhm.
We're not in that situation.
Yeah.
And the other issue, that is particular to us is we just have a courtesy review. So I don't know. But I think we do have to flesh that out, that the character issue really needs to have the master work at developing specifics without, like I said, prescriptive requirement.
Yeah, and that's really the impression that I got from our walk around, from your answers to the questionnaire. Really, the only thing that came out was that it's an eclectic mix, and it's got, crazy personalities, it's got some bold architecture, it's got some, it's got a variety of things, and it's got some things where people just kind of patched it all together as they went. What do you want to kind of grab onto to guide what happens the next time somebody goes and builds something?
Well, we want to remind them they're building an old town residential.
So that would be encouraging a little bit more traditional architecture,
Yeah,
or
historical, turn of the century kind of stuff, as opposed to low sloped roofs and cube kind of construction.
so you want to see more gable roofs and front porches, kind of a language.
Porches and dormers and gable roofs.
Mark? Thoughts?
Pretty old school myself. I think that's what Old Town Residential is implies.
It might imply it, but does it exist? It might imply it, but does it exist? There's a lot of more modern, for lack of a better term, buildings in OTR that I think that settle in perfectly.
Yeah, everybody will have their comeback to it.
What's
Yeah, I
that?
just want to get a sense of where you all are.
No, to me, it gets down to the mass and scaling. That's what it always comes down to for me, is if you can control those, then what am I gonna say? The materials, if they are apropos of the design, across the street from me is a beloved house that has what they call Polish siding. What I'm talking. It's the asphalt shingles. People love that
Love it.
house.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. And it's just, rolled on tar shingles. I think I'm still suffering from PTSD from the house next to what could have been the house next to mine.
Yeah.
But, because that was just a single rectangular mass that was 4,500 square feet. And it, the way it ended up, it did get broken up. The massing did get broken up. It has white corrugated metal siding, but it's kind of appropriate for that house. Do we want to legislate that out?
Right. And that's kind of where I was trying to go with some of these bullet points, was not to say you can't do something, but what you do should be intentional as part of the overall design of the house.
And, I have a few notes, and I think this is wonderful. This is a great start. Thank you very much. And I will have lots of notes for you.
Great.
But one of them is like the setbacks in the OTR encourage the houses to be what, I forget, 10 feet from the property line, front yard setback, which not all the houses are. I would say,
Front is 15 or 20.
is it 15? I don't, I
Street
think it's
side.
20. But
Yeah.
it could be a lot, like Eric and my house are pulled back. I would say, you know, instead of necessarily going to a setback, go to the context of the street,
Yeah,
your neighbors.
Right, right.
we had in the Redstone guidelines for a while, we had a guideline that required you to average
Right.
the setback of the street and
Yeah,
kind of go within a few feet of that
Right.
average
Yeah.
as opposed to the minimum. So that's something that we could look at here.
Yeah, we have, I have the first house built on the block and its front yard setback is similar to Mark's, which was built much later. Fortunately, the house was built between the two of ours, respected
yeah.
that setback.
Same.
And I think that was appropriate, that there's an alignment. But it doesn't really relate to front yard setback per the UCD.
Yeah.
Pardon?
How far back is it?
You know, I don't
It's
remember.
15.
It's 20 feet or,
Yeah,
At least.
it's 15. If that's in the code.
Yeah,
15
it's-
for the street front.
yeah. But ours is 20 or 25 feet
Mhm.
in terms of setback.
Yeah, we could certainly, I mean, that kind of helps keep some variety along the street front. That we could certainly do that kind of average.
And the other, you know, I keep going back to this is, you know, I did do a survey of every house in that,
Yeah,
in OTR. And, you know, that there were a lot of houses, John, mine, that are single rectangular shapes. And there are, you know, it's not an uncommon house in the OTR.
mhm,
But when it gets to be a certain size, and I think that was 1,300 square feet, they all broke into multiple masses.
mhm.
Yeah,
I
that's
think it was
that's a good
1,300.
point. That's a really good point.
And it was kind of like, just naturally, they just said, okay, this is too big to have a single volume.
Yeah,
And kind of organically, they said, they said, we're gonna break this into multiple masses. And that's the kind of, I think, to me, that's the most important part of
mhm,
the guidelines, is if you get this, the mass and the scale correct. The other stuff becomes a matter of personal taste.
yeah,
But, you know, you can not legislate, but you can identify certain sizes and say, okay, that's too big to have it as a single mass.
mhm. Yeah, and the struggle with that is that the land use code just allows for a certain amount of square feet on the lot. And basically what we're trying to do is just dress it appropriately.
Right.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
other
but the house that Mark was referring to, which didn't get built, it met all of the quantitative aspects of the UDC, but it failed on the qualitative.
Yeah.
But it was right to the limit and it was totally inappropriate.
It was virtually a styrofoam cooler upside down.
Oh, no. The other things that we could look at is kind of sometimes there are guidelines that say, you know, your facade has to be broken into kind of a 2/3, 1/3 massing. So you can't have whatever 30 feet of single wall facing the street. You have to have something that's 2/3 and 1/3. And that's a more traditional, potentially more traditional form. Or at least would relate to the more traditional forms that exist in the neighborhood. So that's something that we could consider too, to more specifically say, yeah, you've got this street frontage and you have to push some part of it back.
Well, I think Mark's point to, a smaller house may not need to
Yeah.
have that done, but certainly of the larger scale houses, it's critical.
Yeah. I think that would be good to have sort of a threshold,
Yeah,
because the small square box is very traditional. And if it's a small square box, it's great.
But nobody's building those anymore.
Yeah, so you,
Going to be building the maximum that they're allowed,
yeah,
because financially it doesn't make any sense not to. So when we talk about, the charming small houses, it's not, somebody who pays $1 million for a lot is not gonna put a 900 square foot house on it.
right. But you might have the opportunity to make it, and I don't know, like in Aspen, there's the historic lot is a 3,000 square foot lot. So if you have 6,000 square foot lot now, you can break that into 2 lots and do 2 small houses as opposed to 1 big one. Again, that's another kind of land use code discussion that needs to happen. And I think that's where also when you get into 3 and 4 historic lots, you need to have some way of working with that to not have just that monster upside down cooler.
What is this
That's a planning,
lot size in Old Town?
Yeah,
land use planning.
yeah, exactly.
That's already been decided before it comes
The
to us.
minimum?
Right, but if
25
you
feet?
wanted that as an incentive, because 2 houses
with-
is, if you wanted to see that as an incentive, then you could suggest that becomes part of the land use code as an entree into working with the guidelines. Meredith, do you have a,
I was just wondering what's the lot size in Old Town?
I
Is
don't
it
know that
12
off the top of
25
my
feet?
head.
The minimum lot area is
The
4125.
Size 25 by 110.
That's what I thought.
Okay,
One original lot size.
So I think mine is on 2 plus 5 feet here or there, and
I have 3. I have 3 original lots. My lot's 75 by 110,
Eric,
which is
yours
what most of the other 3 on my block are. Across the street, the Gauze house has that big side yard, so they got at least 4, I think.
Which
They
one
might
is
have
that one?
5. Hmm?
Which one across which street? Across Sopris?
Across Sopris. They'd be on the northwest corner, 8th and Sopris.
The little white one?
No, next to it, west of that.
Oh, okay, the duplex.
The tan stucco two-story.
tan stucco house.
Oh,
Jim and Kara Gaw. Their daughter's living in it now.
good.
Meredith, what's your definition of character of the,
I just wrote down a few words like sense of humor, crazy quilt, haphazard. And my husband just gave me a sticker for my computer or my water bottle. It says Carbondale, Down Valley Trash. So that's what,
that's an oldie but a goodie.
yeah. But there's a sense of humor in a lot of
Mhm.
the funkiness, the quirkiness, and the eclectic junk in some people's yards, including my own.
Yep. Yeah, that's gonna be when somebody spends millions of dollars on a lot, it's hard to get that back.
And the sculpture around town
Mhm.
on private property is eclectic.
Yeah. Okay, that's our word so far. Kim?
Cluster. Yeah, I think eclectic is about the best way to describe it. One thing not quite on that topic, that I really like that you did was talk about considering the street, like we were talking about earlier with the setbacks and the context of each of these. I like that you brought that up several times. I think that's really smart because again, it's such a mixture of everything in OTR that, you know, I think we have to consider the context street by street. But as far as the definition of our character, whoever came up with funky, that was a kind way to put it. I mean, it's a little bit of everything.
Well, that's what I enjoyed about the walk. Stuff I hadn't looked at for a long time.
I walk around it every
Nose-
day.
But I try not to be looking into people's windows and yards.
Oh, I'm looking.
Well, that's what makes it fun to, as even a
Yeah.
person who doesn't live here, just to walk
Yeah.
around.
Right,
And see
right.
kind of who the personalities are that live here.
We've got character in spades here for sure.
Heather.
So one of the things I remember from the walk is when we were going down Sopris and how wide that street is right away. And then like on the north side, it was very set back, all the houses. Seems like much farther than other streets. While even across the street felt like a lot closer to the street. So
Was that a good feeling for you or?
no, it's not the favorite street to walk on or even bike on.
Mhm.
It just feels so open and not really like people are gonna like speed down that street more than other ones.
Mhm.
Too fast.
So having like more houses closer to the setback feels a lot safer, and especially when there was no trees on the north side,
Yeah,
it just felt like open and hot right there.
yeah.
So I do like having like the fences and having like the funky sculptures in the front, having trees and feel a lot more comfortable and pedestrian friendly. It doesn't, that's like the one street doesn't feel like it.
When I first came here, I was really surprised that was part of the OTR, the part out by John. Even though we do have a mix of things going on, but it just doesn't feel like the same character as the rest of the town.
Interesting. I like that idea that having houses, closer to the street gives you a more sense of a neighborhood and a place you want to walk as opposed to having big front yard setbacks feels less encouraging to
And you didn't really
participate in
see
it.
many people parking on the street, but it was also 2 o'clock in the afternoon that we were like walking around. So I haven't really been there in the weekend that much to see if there's actual cars parked on the street on the north side.
There are, but not like over on 8th.
Yeah, where we have so many cars.
Say though, if you look at the historic houses, they have all large front yard setbacks.
Mhm.
But I
And
think,
that gives it kind of a pastoral feel to it.
but a lot of them has like fences in the front and like a little arbor sometimes to go into their
Mhm.
yard.
Yeah, a
So it
little more
feels more
definition.
pedestrian friendly when you have your sidewalk and you have like all
Mhm.
this foliage coming down on the side. Well, that north part feels very, I don't know,
I mean,
modern, I guess.
one thing that I don't know if would be our preview, but is street architecture. And the city, the town has put bollards in on some of our intersections that look pretty permanent to me.
No, they're temporary, experimental. They're doing a traffic study that's being, trying to, make bicycles easier to deal, make it a better fit between bicycles and cars. That's my take on it.
But would we have any voice in the street design that
Yeah, well, they got a
come up
survey.
with?
town's
Because
got,
that certainly affects the historic character of the.
well, the town's got, has put out a survey that's gonna keep going till October to get your opinion on what you think of what they're doing with the traffic control stuff. So, but it's not, I don't know, you might know better, as far as, I don't really think it pertains to what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't think so either. We just approved MAP Carbondale, which is our like transportation study thing. MAP Carbondale, we just approved, which is like our transportation study that we just did. And it has a lot of new improvements. So if you're curious to see if there's, you know, suggested improvements on your street in the OTR, I think 8th Street was the main one. And
They
Hendricks.
got them over on Hendricks Drive too. And
Tactical urbanism is what they're calling it. They did that for A Street, what, 3 years ago, when they were trying to figure out if we should do one bike path on one side, on the west side of the street. Yeah, it didn't work out so well when it was at the
it's a
Rio
tough one
Grande.
because we didn't really build our streets wide enough for 2 lanes of parking and 2 lanes of traffic and bicycles. That takes a pretty wide street and we didn't do that.
So,
Well, that kind of raises in my mind the question of street trees,
That's just exactly what I just wrote.
which I kind of stuck into the landscape section here. And whether we want to encourage people to plant, you know, a significant tree that will grow as part of landscape design.
Don't you have to plant 3, right?
yeah, it's part of the UDC is street trees.
The town will plant street trees on your property or on the town right away for free, but you have to install irrigation to get trees. So
Okay.
if you don't have irrigation, you can't have trees. But the town will plant large stature trees where appropriate if there aren't power lines above. So oaks, not ashes, maples,
Mhm.
etc.
Have people taken advantage of that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we did.
Eric has 3.
Flame maples, they're beautiful.
maples.
That's great.
Autumn blaze.
Mhm.
And we have an oak. Dick and Rita Marsh have an oak.
Mhm.
Do they,
You have
I will
that
say the
catalpa
street,
that won't die.
Yeah.
the street
I'm trying
trees
to get-
are eclectic. They're just a real menagerie of different species and planting layouts and, you know,
Dan just did a survey of Old Town. He counted all the Siberian elms. I was supposed to bring that tonight. I forgot about it. There are fewer Siberian elms than we thought. There were, I can't remember what he said, but there are more hardwoods than anticipated. And the ash trees are mostly have been treated for emerald ash borer. So the ash trees in Old Town, for the most part, have been treated. And the ones that haven't been treated have been removed.
yeah,
But the census was 2020, or no, 2010. So the tree board's updating that.
that was gonna be one of my questions was, is there like a pattern that they use to plant the trees, or is it just you stick 3 trees somewhere in that right of way?
If there's public right of way, the town will plant them.
But they don't keep them like an orderly distance apart or?
Oh, yeah. There's
they
a
do?
whole ordinance.
Okay, okay, that's,
It's online.
There's a list of what trees you're allowed to do too.
oh, okay.
On private property as well, suggested trees.
Okay.
So is that it, about it for the
Well-
guideline review?
I wanted to bring up one more thing, which is at the very end here. And Lindsay kind of touched on it a little bit, and that's do we want to have guidelines that talk about sustainability? How, sort of making decisions about building materials and things contributes to sustainability. I think we certainly would talk about that in terms of historic buildings as a separate discussion, but in terms of new construction, do you guys want to get into that at all? And then one of the other comments
So
from the state was
does that
hazard.
mean a net zero building or?
No, I think,
We already have a sustainability
Okay.
building code, so if it's a new construction, all of that is already baked in.
okay, I will look into that.
So chapter 5 is probably just gonna be referencing that building code.
Yeah. And we would need to be sure that we're not telling people to do something other than what is in that code already. But I think in terms of the guidelines for the treatment of historic buildings, that's an area that we could expand on a little bit in the existing guidelines. Just kind of appropriate ways of dealing with the historic fabric with sustainability in mind.
So the best way for feedback would be written
Yeah.
notes
if you
to
wanna-
you based on this
Yep.
initial outline?
Yeah. And I think from what we've talked about tonight, I'll try to kind of revise this where it is now with your comments, thinking about the eclectic nature of the district, mass and scale, and how do we deal with that? Maybe looking at this 2/3, 1/3 idea, and a threshold of building size that kind of triggers some of these things. I did have in here, unfortunately, John, specific guidelines about not copying historic buildings and making fake Victorians. So, that's something that we want to talk about.
And then just a reminder to email Susanna directly. Don't CC everybody. Just to conform to our open meeting laws.
Or we could have a meeting at some point too.
Well, we're already having the OTR open house
Oh, that's right.
a week from Tuesday.
Oh, golly,
So
another meeting.
Let's not over plan our schedules.
I have a question about that open house. So our intention, and I know that we're getting to this on the agenda, but it's not this specifically.
Correct.
It's more an open conversation with people, right? Everybody? Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah. And
Go out.
2 weeks ago?
16th of June. So if you, at least five
Yeah,
of you that should have gotten one.
You did great.
Mhm. We did get ours.
so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you expect to present at this meeting. Is it going to be kind of a walk-in, walk-out kind of casual meeting, or is it going to be more formal presentation by somebody, and who will that be?
Exactly.
Both.
I think we should spend like,
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a few key things that you're gonna wanna tell people, like the voluntary nature of this exercise at this point. Finding way, and so I don't know if we wanna have some posters that talk about the program as it currently stands, or if you wanna have somebody stand up and explain the program, how it currently works. Cause that's gonna be the first question is, what are you gonna make me do? Or how does this affect me, my life? So I think that's kind of that's the first thing that needs to be presented. And if it's a formal presentation, I think, that's what you lay out up front. if it's more of a walk-in and meet with people, we have to have some posters or something up on the wall that talk about the program as it exists now.
I do think we should spend like 10 minutes like introducing the project and going over all the aspects of it. And I do like the idea of doing like stations, maybe a couple different things like more depth in, I don't know, our plaque program here and a little bit more stuff about historic preservation in general, because it seems like nobody knows what it means.
Yeah. And I think it might be interesting to do, you know, the question, what is the character of the OTR? And have people write down what they think the character is, you know, with 1 or 2 words. And so we'd need like some big Post-it notes or something that we can write things down on. I think it's more, people need to know kind of the key things up front, but then I think something a little bit more per one-on-one is better.
Like more of a charrette.
Yeah.
I think that format, to what you're saying,
Yeah, 10
when we
minutes
had the open house for the
comp plan.
dun, 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 dun. Yes, thank you. The comp plan. It worked really well to have stations, but I think a hybrid of what Susanna's suggesting,
But they
and
did the
that would be
charrette like
great.
earlier.
Yeah, no, I'm talking more like what you're talking about, where we have some posters, some tables, and some topics where we can get feedback from people, because I have had several people ask me about the letter. And they're like, what is this? What does this mean? What do we need to do? And the way I've explained it is, it's a conversation. Right now, people can do anything under the sun in our neighborhood, and we want to hear what you have to say as far as, you know, what gets built next to you, what happens, you know, in our district. So I think, like you said, they want to know, what are you going to make me do? What can't I do?
Yep.
So, you know, maybe Eric or someone gives a little talk at the beginning, or maybe they go through the stations. Maybe at the beginning, it's like, this is what we're doing here. And then,
How to proceed throughout the night.
yeah, and I love the idea of the character question.
Mhm.
Yeah, we
Because
gotta
that's kind of
figure out what
fun.
kind of stations we want to,
Right, exactly.
like now.
Yeah.
I see the poster, the main poster is really quick and easy to read. It kind of explains in very broad and general terms what we're trying to do, complimentary review, keeping these guidelines to kind of intact, and but it's not anything set in stone. And the purpose of this meeting is to gather everybody else's input to what do you think there is you want to do. Kind of almost like what we did years ago with the pool. We had a general concept of what we wanted the pool to be, and then we put that out, and then everybody came and put little sticky notes on with their comments. Not that we want to use sticky notes, but to gather a lot, everybody else's comments on what they think of what we're trying to do, what you just outlined
Mhm.
in this, in very broad and, but basically, kind of letting them know that what we would like to do with Old Town is what we're already doing with HCC.
Mhm.
So did anybody actually show up to the town park parcel that one first Friday in June, like 2022? Any of you guys do? No? Okay, so what they did in the middle of town park or here on the across from Thunder River is Kathleen was in charge of this thing. So she had like several big posters and people just put sticky notes about like, what is mixed use? Do you like affordable housing? So they had little topics and everything, and people wrote down things that they liked about the town and what they want in this space kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we just do something like similar to that,
Yeah.
but with the topics that we need to.
Yeah,
have.
they're kind of at the same time we're talking pool, more or less.
The
Um,
town is very accustomed to this sticky note procedure,
Yeah.
because that's what we did with MAP
Yeah.
Carbondale, that's what we did with the comp plan. So I don't think that that would
And the
be,
sticky notes
a
are good because it
surprise.
kind of limits how much they can say.
We'll get the little one.
Yeah, get the little teeny ones.
but we don't have much time to pull this together because it's on the 16th, right?
15.
15th.
Yeah.
And so these posters aren't gonna fall out of the sky. So we
Well,
need
I
to
could do
figure
the
out what.
posters if people will send me their ideas.
Oh,
I'll
we
try to
have
put
the-
them together.
We have the printer.
I have a,
Basically, it's just kind of just outlining this, isn't it? What,
Well,
No,
that's what I
think-
was asking, and I think
That might be a
that's
little much.
not where we're,
No, I don't think we
going.
want to give them this. The one thing I was thinking was maybe we give them the broad headings like site design, you know,
What do
have
you
your
like
building-
about?
building orientation, and then we ask them, do you think that this is important?
yeah,
and then they can.
And then sometimes we do like the examples of houses and things like that. Maybe we should have a poster that shows like, do you like this kind of housing style? Do you like that kind?
I'd like to stay away from style. It's gonna come into the conversation, but I think people get more concerned when you're trying, if they think you're legislating style. So I think you wanna keep it broader and just say, you know, find ways of, you know, do you think a gable roof is important? Do you think, you know, massing is important? Sort of ask those bigger questions that then go back to certain styles of architecture, but you're not saying you have to do a Victorian house.
Susanna, were you, when you were talking about how this works currently, were you thinking that we tell about the historic commercial core? Like how we do the courtesy review, and so maybe we have a poster that says, at present, you know,
Exactly.
this is how this works. If you're making changes, if you're building something new, you
Yeah.
come to us for a courtesy review.
Right. And that, you know, it's not obligatory, that it's voluntary.
Yes.
Participation is voluntary.
We won't list the people that don't listen to us.
No.
But it's really a nice thing for people to be able to come and talk to architects, and
Mhm.
sometimes they look at it backwards because they're so afraid,
Yeah,
you know, so I liked your idea of introducing that maybe as our first poster.
Like a flow chart, so and what the process is.
yeah, and just saying, you know, we have these guidelines, they're available to you. We talked about having those available at the meeting. What they currently cover, how we've approached writing guidelines for the HCC zone, and how we'll approach writing them for the OTR zone. And it's a voluntary, at this point, a voluntary participation. Just
And I
to
think we should have
encourage-
that map of where OTR is,
Mhm.
because even though we look at it all the time, other people don't.
Yep,
it was included with the
yeah, that's
letter.
definitely gotta
Still.
be on there.
I can print it.
I'm
24 by
talking-
36 poster of it.
I can print it 11/17.
yeah, I think it's, how big is the room we're in?
It's good size.
Like this size?
It's the Callaway room at Third Street Center, so it's maybe not quite as big as.
Uh-huh,
It's plenty of room.
yeah, I think we should do maybe 24 by 36 and have some easels, or have a place to stick things on the wall.
I got a poster of the town, just like that one, but much smaller. And it shows OTR, but it's pretty tiny on, compared to the rest of the town.
It might be nice to have some handouts as well of the map of the OTR, just 11 by 17 or something like that.
I can do that.
Okay.
I can't do anything over 11/17.
Mine's like a 2x3, I think, feet.
Yeah, that's 24 by 36 poster board.
Yeah,
Yeah, just give them reference on it. I bring that.
Copy has some prices.
We have a printer sitting right here.
But yeah, but I
She
can't
doesn't
print.
do 24 by 36.
Yeah, and then a big blow up of,
Does it have to be that big? Copy, they have a whole price sheet. Or Kay will do.
well, that's where I got mine,
okay.
copy. But a big blow up
Okay.
of the OTR that we had
Get out of
also.
here. So maybe Kay, you and I should talk a little bit more, and maybe Eric, you should be prepared to give an introduction.
Oh, yeah, I'd be prepared to introduce you.
Cheater. See,
Well,
left that part out.
no, I think that's important. I'll put together a kind of a summary of why we're here,
Yep,
where we're coming from, and that HCC is reviewed, and we felt that it's important that OTR fall under the same level of review.
okay,
Because communication is always important, and even though it's courtesy, good decisions come from review. But I think it'll be important to have you speak about the procedure of where we are and where we're going in terms of timeline, for example, and then the final deliverable, I guess. We're looking for a chapter 4,
okay.
and we're really fortunate to have your involvement because of your history with the guideline development. So I would do that.
Okay. Okay, and then I can talk about kind of where the program is now, and then what the process for the meeting is going to be in terms of people, writing down what they think the character of the OTR is, and then maybe just stickers for these things that we're looking at generating guidelines for these larger areas. How does that
We would
sound?
do that as a formal presentation, and then have a breakout for people to do their sticker work and have the refreshments.
Because I think the presentation isn't more than 10 or 15 minutes
Yeah,
total.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, short and
Rather than
sweet.
stickers, I think we should give them a little bit more voice and make it more like an index card size kind of something. Just
Most people just do the regular size sticky note.
They can do as
ones,
many
so that-
sticky notes as they want. There's something.
Just write it on, that's why they stick it on there, because if you have index cards, you can't put that on
Sticky
there.
notes. They're just kind
But
of,
maybe they don't want to make it public either.
that's
Yeah.
okay too.
I see, have a little basket and let them write their comment, put it in the basket, and we'll review it. We don't need to stick it up on a wall. We did that for the pool because it was mainly kids we were getting there. The parents making comments for their children or vice versa kind of thing. So I think just a comment in a basket with a bunch of 3x5 cards is plenty. And it gives them enough room to say what they want, but it doesn't get too wordy.
But the downside of that, John, is that people can't look at other people's comments.
Yeah, and that's the good side too.
Well, we could certainly
So don't
have
forget, somebody will have to collate all of this.
Yeah, and read it all.
And read it all. And so I think you need to stick with one strategy or the other.
Yeah,
And there will be an opportunity to comment on the Carbondale Connect page. So if somebody doesn't want to make a comment at the meeting, they can reach out via the webpage, or they can reach out to Ellie, or, we can have that contact information. But somebody's gonna have to keep track of all of this, which is Me. And I would really prefer that we just use one strategy. Otherwise, I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be very confusing.
Yeah, so which strategy?
I would go with the sticky notes.
Yeah,
That's what they do for every single
3 by
project. pretty
5.
they're
much.
conditioned to doing it, but
And they
you know,
know
the
how to do
point-
this.
the point is good. We'll have, you know, on the poster or whatever it is. If you prefer to email your comments, or if you prefer to go on to Connect Colorado, they'll have a couple of different, or Connect Carbondale, Connect something. They'll have several different ways if they want to do something other than write on that
They
sticky
can
note
write
right
an
then.
essay through an email if they want to.
Somebody's gotta go through the thing no matter what we use.
That's,
Sticky notes, John.
Kay has to do that.
Okay, I'll work with Kay in the next week, week and a half, and we'll come up with a plan and.
Should I put together my bullet points and,
Yeah.
and have you review that prior to
Sure, if you want to.
the unveiling, so I don't look like a total idiot?
That's fine. And I think I'll plan to be here a couple hours earlier that day, so we can kind of pull things together at the last minute if we need to.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. If there, is there anything else?
Yes, we actually do have something very important.
Oh,
No, I know, agenda wise, but on this subject.
What's your email,
Anything?
Susanna?
Okay,
It's V as in Victor, KR at Reed Architects, REID, architects is plural.com.
okay. Next action item is the,
Thanks,
budget.
Suzanne.
Yeah, yeah, have a good trip home. Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere near Aspen for the next weekend.
Lucky you.
Well, the music festival lost their programs that we printed. So Dan had to go at 3 o'clock this afternoon to Lafayette to pick up the reprint and come back over. I-70's closed both ways because of a fire. So he's gonna take 285 south or go up through Meeker and
And then there was the accident in Genesee Floyd Hill area too.
Oh, is that what?
they were
That's
turning
Lindsay, yeah.
Denver
Okay.
traffic back at,
Eric,
not Beaverbrook, but.
thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
The budget update.
Yeah, so I'll try to be fast. The first thing is we need to set a budget for the refreshments for the open house. So what do you guys think should be the max? Give us a budget and we'll go get refreshments.
How many people?
I mean, there's what did we say? 100, 200 people in the OTR and like
No.
60 will.
I sent out like 73 letters.
Okay.
And we figured that a third of those will show up. So probably about 25 people
Including us.
plus us.
How much did we spend for the Meet the Candidates forum time when over at Third Street Center?
I'm not sure.
We could do about half of what they had there,
Yeah, we're not sure what they spent.
because they basically had, well, what you had listed here, cheese crackers, sodas.
So let me give you a rundown. So if we do city market, party platters, which is probably the most reasonable, you can get an appetizer platter, one appetizer for 20 to 35 per. A deli meat and cheese platter can range from $30 to $70. And then we can get a cookie platter and some drinks. So just give us a number and I can mix and match. I can do crackers. We're also going to try to respect, people's dietary,
Get a veggies dip thing.
yeah, we'll do
What
maybe
time
some
is this
veggies.
happening?
What's that?
Yeah, 6
6 or
o'clock?
something.
From 6 to 8.
Oh, okay, so,
6 to 8. Should be 6 to 7:30.
No, people.
Don't start, okay, food
Beer.
and drinks.
Yeah, $100.
no,
That's not gonna be enough.
yeah, more.
I mean,
600?
Did you say you have a per person number for kind of what you were just talking about, or not really?
so approximately 25 attendees
Yeah, right,
plus
we agree.
various, I would say, just looking at this, probably $250 can do a variety, we can get some drinks, some crackers, do more
Yeah, that's
veggie
fine.
Yes.
forward.
Yes, 250.
So you'll need to make a motion.
We're fine.
Do we need a motion?
No.
Okay, yes.
Okay. 250 it is.
You're good.
Mhm.
Plus or minus.
So the next thing is walking tour translation.
Cleo.
You guys talked about this with the Board of Trustees. There's 3 options. We can, one, ask the website company to add Google Translation button for free. Add a translation below the English version or create a duplicated. For both of those second ones, it would cost about $2,300 to translate all the stuff we already have.
But you think we can ask
No.
No.
So.
tell me the first one again?
Okay, so we did ask the website,
Yeah.
the Clio,
Right.
if they could do that, and
Uh.
they are working on it, but that's a donation by donation company. And so until they get all of the money together, and then it's a subscription. So not only do you have to purchase the app, but then you have to pay the subscription fee. And so what the timeline for the Clio app to actually have a Google Translate button is unknown.
Okay,
So our alternative would be to have all of the text translated by a professional translator and then do a contributing tour that's nested into the current tours. And that's probably, it's not the preferred alternate, but it is what most everybody is doing on that particular website
Hmm.
right now.
2,300.
And so the planning department does have a budget for consulting expense, which we could tap into for that.
Let's do it.
Is that a one-time fee or is it an annual?
No, this is just a one-time.
I found that by accident. I had no idea what the Clio was, and it was really quite enlightening.
You can use it in any
I
town.
just, yeah, lots of different towns.
But
I just
yeah,
spent 10
let's
minutes
just do
with it.
that. If the money is there, why wouldn't we?
Yeah, if the money's there,
Now we need a motion.
Yes, you do need a motion for that.
is there a motion for that?
Which one's gonna be easier for some low-tech kind of person to go in and do
It's
it?
gonna be the exact same thing.
Just in
It's
Spanish.
just going to be in Spanish.
Oh,
So you can do it with your cell phone,
okay.
which I did it, having dinner on the porch last night.
Do,
so.
do we have any idea how many people have used the English version?
I'm not, I don't know that it has visit numbers, but I don't have that current number.
Yeah, I don't know.
How long's
Yeah,
it
I'd be
been available?
curious.
Few years.
Really?
Yeah.
Since COVID.
Oh, I never heard of it till yesterday.
Right, that's our job. We have to
Wow.
That's why
let
we
people
did the
know.
postcards.
Well, I'd like to make a motion.
I'll listen to a motion.
We approve the $2,300 expenditure from the planning budget for Spanish translation for the Clio tour.
I'll second that.
Been made in second, all in favor?
Right.
Aye. Motion has passed.
I think that's fantastic. I was really.
And then
impressed.
the last thing is structure of merit plaques. We have 4 submitted applications so far. But we need to, or you guys need to decide if you guys are going to absorb the cost of the cedar posts that are necessary.
Did we
Yeah.
absorb the cost on the others?
Mhm.
Don't you guys think it should still be business as usual? Like absorb the cost of the posts and they pay their half of the plaque? Isn't that part of the question? Are we changing the system or are we
Correct.
keep
just
going?
We just want to confirm that you are happy with how it's going. And so that we know how to apportion those line items.
Has there been any complaint that private participation in purchasing the plaque? No,
Not at all. It's a great price.
okay.
So I got 4 done as listed here, and I got 2 more that are, one of them not returning. I actually got 3 others. One of them not returning my call. One's not gonna sign until he talks to Jared. He won't do anything without Jared's approval. And the 689 guy, the new guy down there, Grover, he's highly interested that they're gonna be doing some work. And so he may stall till next year. So that's basically where I'm at with that. And for as far as the homes that I see that are out there that could use it, need a plaque. We're taking care of Euclid pretty good. The corner of Grover, or no, Cleveland and Grover, Cleveland and 8th Street, we got that intersection all surrounded.
So really, John, the question is, can we move forward with the plaques?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to move this along. I appreciate it.
I would recommend that we make the cost of the anti-graffiti lamination a part of the plaque cost and not as an option.
Yeah, and the rounded corners. I like the town requested rounded corners because that's a much safer deal. I don't think that added any expense to it at all.
Do you need a motion for that, Kay?
Well, a little bit then.
It was a little bit, but then they don't match the other plaques around town. Do you care?
I think we should leave it
And this
as
is digging
is.
up a whole new can
Right.
of worms.
I say leave it as is, what we've been doing.
That's what I think. Pricing, they cover half, and the cedar posts, we cover that.
Well, the unit price was only $46. I
Motion
thought we were
for that,
covering
Kay?
the entire thing last
Or
year.
a fence, yeah.
I would like to make a motion that we continue the unit price for the 2024 plaques and that we approve the anti-graffiti lamination.
A second,
I'll second.
we got a Meredith seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, moving right along.
Yeah, finally, our final thing. For the 2026 budget, we just wanted to ask you if you wanted to request a line item for education expenses. It's outlined in the memo, but basically if 4 of you guys took advantage of it, the budget request would total $1,600.
And that's just a budget consideration for 2026. We don't have to approve it tonight, just think about that.
Yeah,
So can we talk about that budget line item the next meeting?
The budget will come up.
Yeah.
Probably in August because it is now budget
Mhm.
season for 2026, so. Just
yeah, and I'd like to see the full budget. everything that we're asking for.
So you'll need to, when I ask for an agenda, if you can include that request. I guess.
This is July already.
Mhm. The season basically goes from August or July to about November.
Can we see what our budget was for last year?
So right now you have $2,500 that's outlined in the budget memo. So that's what you have. Jared had been told that the design guideline money was going to go forward into 2025, but for some reason that did not carry forward. We have our money for the design guidelines. It was just the whole pot, the $30,000.
Okay.
That did not move forward. So right now, all you have is your $2,500 that you have for miscellaneous expenses. And that's, so if we were to project that for 2026, it would be that $2,500 plus education expenses. If you wanted to request something else, like for the Thompson House or some other programming, then that's something that you need to discuss with Jared in August so that he can make the appropriate requests in front of the BOT.
Okay. Yeah, because I want to review, our relationship with the Thompson House budgets.
So, and that would be a good conversation to have.
Okay.
And Susanna's fee is covered
Yes.
separately?
Yes, the grant is covered.
Oh, that's right. She's a grant.
Yes, it's just, we had hoped to keep that whole pot in case something went awry with, I don't know, the federal government.
Yeah. I thought we were like using it as emergency money to cover her if something else expenses came up on this.
No, I mean, we've got money to
Yeah.
cover that, so.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
So we'll do
Any-
budget next month with whatever else that might show up.
correct.
Anything else?
I just have one question. I know Jess Peterson has he resigned?
Yes, and that was gonna be part of the staff update. Jess has resigned. John, you need to reapply in August. Your term is expiring,
Oh,
so you need to reapply.
oh,
Can
I just did that, I thought.
It's been a couple of years.
it's just that we're getting to the meat of the
Right,
subject that we've been talking about for a year or so.
sure.
It would just be good to have Jess's input on this, and I don't know.
It was, I really don't know the situation. He
Okay.
just, he's had a life event that prompted the resignation. His membership, his term was expiring in August anyway. So if you want to seek him out
Yep.
personally,
Okay.
I just, that's all Jared just said, he resigned. We don't have any more information than that.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Basically, we'll have one empty member spot right now.
Right.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
The meeting?
That's the only thing I've actually learned that I remember.
You don't have to have a motion.
No,
to
you
adjourn.
don't. You can just.
Just walk out.
Meeting is adjourned, just like that.
Okay.
Thank you, Kay. Thanks, Ellie.
Highly interested in being on the